Hey curious and creatives, today I am going to share Gerrilyn with you. Gerrilyn is 10 by 7. She is 5 signatures full of beauty, 192 pages. She has a 2-inch spine and a 5-inch mouth. She has a removable tassel of sari silk and other laces. Her cover is stitched pieces of upholstery, trims, appliques, laces, some collage paper in the background, stitching, buttons, and her back cover is the same. Okay, she is full of vintage papers, vintage ephemera, tons of stitch details, a ton of journaling space, a true journaler's journal. She has decorated pages, coffee dyed paper, vintage lace, charms, dangles, a bit of collaging, clusters, and snippet rolls, among other things. So we're going to open her up and take a quick look at her. My name is Mimi, and I am so glad that you're here with me today. And the closure is ribbon. Okay, so as I mentioned, tons of creative space, journaling space, coffee dyed paper, vintage paper. There's a ton of ephemera in here, and a lot of it is vintage and some of it is vintage inspired. This is a removable or floating journaling card. Tons of tails everywhere, guys, everywhere. All her tails are everywhere. If it's not something that you like, of course, it's easier to cut them. So this floating journaling card also serves as a pocket. Tabs with dangles, vintage papers, clusters, more stitching details, ruffles, authentic vintage ephemera everywhere. There's a little coffee dyed tag stamped. Original beading, fabric clusters, paper clusters, vintage and coffee dyed paper everywhere. Vintage music paper with a vintage postcard and a wood bead. Vintage ephemera. Vintage paper, snippet roll, the end of the first signature. So she really is a beautiful combination of vintage papers, coffee dyed papers, some magazine papers. This is a vintage piece of music paper made into a pocket with some vintage ephemera and decorated with a bit of a collage cluster there and a little would-be dangle on the paper clip, and more vintage ephemera on the back of that paper clip. An original little tag decoration. There's quite a bit of this tape that I made. It's vintage inspired tape, but it's homemade tape. Some of the pages are very fragile, and so I used it. I love it, and I used it to also reinforce some pieces. This is vintage inspired ephemera on a pocket that also has a bit of a belly band. The center of the first signature. This is a belly band with a collaged journaling card, which also serves as a pocket for this little tag with an original milk bottle cap, and some tuck spaces here for some bits and pieces for decoration for you to use as you wish. A bit of a paper, vintage paper dangle. A corner tuck, which is a floating one. You can put it anywhere in the journal. It's removable. More vintage ephemera. Original dangle. This is a floating lace pocket. You can also put things here. It's stitched around. I only stuffed the front of it, so it would fit a little better. And this one would has the equivalent of what would be 3 pockets. With this little bulldog clip that goes here. Piece of an envelope with original vintage ephemera. Another floating corner tuck. Vintage papers, ephemera. These are magazine images inside this envelope with some original vintage ephemera book page, and this is a card, a little postcard, vintage postcard, authentic. Piece of the snipper roll, vintage ephemera with an original vintage photo. This is a combination of vintage ephemera as well as a piece of a digital kit, and I do not remember whose digital kit this is. When I created Gerrilyn over a year ago, it was not my intention to offer her, so I really did not pay attention to the digital kits that I was using, that I had on hand. And she's part of that collection of journals that I showed in my introductory video, which I will be sharing most of, if not all of them, within the next few weeks and months, because they are quite a bit. So if you do know the creator of this and whatever other part of a digital kits I may have in this journal, I would so appreciate if you could mention it in the comments to give that creative person credit for the beautiful work that I have included in this journal. I would so appreciate it. Another piece of a snipper roll, and this is a repurposed part of an envelope as a pocket with a collaged journaling card, a vintage inspired card, and an original piece of ephemera, vintage ephemera. And you know, I'm just going to leave it here and I will place it back in afterwards. A vintage book page, a collaged journaling card, and in a belly band that also serves as, you know, a pocket like the other one, with some goodies tucked in as well in those little spots. Vintage ephemera, a paper bead that I made a few months back, an upside down piece of vintage paper, another bit of pinned papers, and the center of what I believe is the 4th signature. More vintage ephemera. Sorry, ribbon, piece of it. in another pocket, excuse me, with vintage inspired ephemera with a little belly band, decorated with a strip of vintage paper. This is a charm that I made, and it was, I hope you can see it, inspired by a video that I watched from Dragana, who is the creator of the YouTube channel Sasibo. I will try my best to link it below. I have yet to do that, so it'll be a learning exercise for me. This was so much fun to make, and I love her content. She's so talented. Definitely worth watching if you're feeling creative and you want to take out some paints or alcohol inks and do a little bit of mixed media, and even not necessarily so you can actually make them with paper or cardstock. So yeah, check it out. I'm gonna link it below. The beginning of the 5th signature, more vintage ephemera, decorate a paper clip, a homemade bead, vintage paper, a page from Daphne's diary, a papered snipper roll, the center of the last signature, and this is a safety pin with some wood beads in it that I threw together. Vintage ephemera, vintage postcard, vintage ephemera tucked into a bit of a collage tuck spot. Another bead. And here's more of that tape. And in this clip is another floating journaling card, which serves as a keeper of whatever you want. Here I've just included some vintage inspired ephemera in that belly band. And another homemade bead. And this is it, the back cover. This is Gerrilyn. Thank you so much for taking a look at her with me. I hope to share another one of my journals very soon. And I hope that you are here with me next time.